users are finding that they're saving anywhere from 3+ hours a day just on content creation and client interaction.
AI is here to innovate and optimize the way you do work today so you can accelerate getting to tomorrow. And understanding where are you and where do you want to go is so important in building these tools so that they are scalable.
There are prompt engineers for a reason. Your input is just as powerful as your output. So if you're giving it a shoddy sentence and expecting it to do all the work, can it do all the work? Yes. Are you going to get the best output that is also going to serve your company and your brand and your future clients? Probably not.
How do you make sure that the content you're producing is good and high quality? Hello, everyone. Today we're diving into AI. We're doing a little bit of a one-on-one with Ayesha Taylor, who is an AI consultant and digital strategist. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, Ayesha is an AI consultant, digital strategist, and has an extensive background in business development and solution architecture. She specializes in AI consulting, automation, Web3, and crafting comprehensive digital marketing strategies that fuel business growth. And I can tell you firsthand that she is our resident AI specialist and has done a ton of work for us at Merge Marketing. And we are super excited to dive into this topic today because a lot of it is applicable to many, many businesses. So, are you ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's get into it. I mean, I'm really excited to be here. So here we go.
Right on. Well, okay, firstly, tell us a little bit more about what excited you, like what brought you into AI. When did you start?
So I would say I started it right when ChatGPT got released. So that was November 2022. And that's so 3 years ago. I was already working in Web3, already working in marketing. And the moment this came on the scene, I was like, okay, I got to try it. I've always been someone who creates extensive processes, SOPs, proposals, really lengthy content, and really lengthy guides. And I would spend hours doing this type of thing. And then all of a sudden, I could feed what I wanted to into the system, into this transformational generative model, and get it to output exactly what I've been spending hours on. And it would take a fraction of the time. It would take, in the beginning, anywhere from like 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And now it's lightning speed with how much it's developed over time.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And I'll tell you, like even when we first started having conversations about AI automation, you were such an early adopter. You were speaking a language I didn't even really understand. And now I'm seeing how invaluable it is to any business and you really the power and how powerful it can really be.
I mean, the big thing is saving time, right? And we talk about this all the time is that we want to be working on our businesses, not in our businesses. And in this day and age, if you own a business, that you are expected to be everything. And when you're expected to be everything, you need help. That's for your marketing, your content creation, your client outreach, your lead gen, everything. And these tools can help you be better and faster than ever.
Yeah, 100% more efficiency, better time spent on the things that truly matter. Not saying that like the marketing initiatives don't matter, but if you're able to free up that time so you can work on other things that your brain that requires more brain power, then oh my gosh, it's so worth it. So we talked about, building workflows and automation. I'm so curious to some practical examples of how you're seeing or even building models for small to mid-sized businesses. What are you doing today? How are you using AI to improve and save on time?
For sure. So, as I mentioned before about creating guides, SOP processes, that's something that I try to do for every business that I work with. So, you're creating that standard of operation and that establishing that brand voice. So, what we're really helping our clients do, in especially small to mid-sized businesses, is creating consistent content. So, consistent written content primarily, and making sure it sounds like them, it's informative, it's something that not only a user wants to read, but that Google is going to serve and ChatGPT is going to give these users asking these questions inside its platform your content. So some of the things that we're doing for is Google My Business, LinkedIn posts, basically any social media platform, and especially blog writing as well.
Amazing. And I know it's not as easy as just putting in a prompt to ChatGPT and saying like, make me make me a Google My Business post or create a LinkedIn post for me. So I would love to see if you're willing to share a demo or a breakdown of some of the GPTs that you've built and how
For
you're
sure.
using them for businesses today.
Absolutely. So I'll take you through one of the clients that we're working with. It's called Ross Taylor Mortgages. He is a mortgage broker based in Canada. He's known nationwide, and he has published over 700 different articles across the site over the last 20 years. And now with the help of our custom GPTs, we are pumping out really good on brand content faster than we've ever put out content. And we're starting to see the kickback, not just from an SEO perspective, but from users actually telling us that they're finding us through ChatGPT because ChatGPT is constantly scraping our site and looking at that. So I'll show you what that is.
Yeah, let's dive in. I think that that's sort of that, secret sauce that everybody is looking for now is how do you get served in the AI engine responses?
For sure.
So great to see you're seeing that happen.
So, as I mentioned, we have several different GPTs. Anywhere where you see this little house icon, and that's the icon for Ross Taylor Mortgages, is that house mortgages. And we have a lot of different custom GPTs. This is one that we'll do a demo for is our LinkedIn, but we've got a GMB post creator, a tweet post creator. We've got different ones for different sections. So something that's interesting is the newsletter that is sent out monthly. Each month is a quite a long one. So instead of creating a massive newsletter GPT, instead of broken into smaller sections so that each GPT can do a really good job at those specific sections in the newsletter. So your input is just as powerful as your output. You want to make sure you're very, very specific. So let's do a quick run through of creating a LinkedIn post in Ross Taylor's voice and based on any input that it receives. So I'll walk you through what it would look like grabbing a blog article. And one of the notes that we talked about on one of our previous calls is that when you're working with ChatGPT and you're giving it any sort of input, you want it to write something in your voice. Yes, now ChatGPT has the capacity that you can give it a link to a website and it'll scrape it. But with best practice, I would say actually copying that content into the chat box plus the link, and you're going to get a better response.
Okay.
Because if you just use the link, it might just grab the first couple paragraphs and not actually look at the totality of what you're trying to create that post on. So we're using one of these articles. This is something that he recently published on Canadian mortgage trends. And I'm going to just copy this.
Okay. So you just copy everything, including the
Yeah.
images, the links,
Yeah,
everything.
exactly.
Okay.
Because it can determine, it's very smart, the interface. It can determine what's an image, what's a CTA, what's an advertisement, what's not. But really, I want to make sure that I'm grabbing all of this content because the post that I want it to create is based on all of this content. I could give it just a little snippet and say, create a LinkedIn post based on this. And it will do that. But if I give it a longer post, it's going to create something that reflects more or less the entire thing that it is reading.
Context is king.
Exactly. Okay. So running back over here. So please create. Oh, I could spell, I swear. A LinkedIn post. Let me in my voice. I like to say based on an article that I've written. If it's not based on something that Ross has written, if it's say like just a piece of news that we want to say, it would just say write a post based on this piece of content. But
Okay.
in this case, I do want to actually point to the article. So I'm going to say create a LinkedIn post for me in my voice based on my recent article. I'm going to go shift, enter, enter. And I just did control V on that copy paste from the article. I'm going to do shift, enter, enter. And one last step that I'm going to add is I'm going to say, please point to the article right before my CTA. With all of the GPTs that we've created for Ross Taylor Mortgages, we have a consistent CTA at the bottom. So in
Okay.
this case, if it's something that he's actually written, I'm going to say, I want you to point to that article before the CTA. So that's the only difference if I was giving this GPT something that we've published versus something that we've grabbed from the internet, like a piece of news, for example. So I'm going to grab that. And then I just grabbed the link and I'm going to control V there. And let's see what it gives me.
All right. And so have you given it like length criteria, and it sounds like you've given it a structure as well, like CTA at the very bottom.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it's created a title. It's created basically a summary for LinkedIn specifically, the posts that based on research and for Ross in his industry, the ones that do the best for our competition is the ones that are kind of single sentence line breaks. So like no long paragraphs, none. Nobody really has the attention span for it. And because it's LinkedIn, we want to go with more of an opinionated approach because it's mostly his peers as his audience.
Right.
So in that sense, this is more of like storytelling. It's supposed to be more I's and we's in terms of positioning. It's always going to be from a first person point of view because that's also his brand voice. So every new sentence should be a new line. And that's very strict in the instructions of this GPT. And then because I asked it to point to that article, it's pointed to that article. And then, as I mentioned, we have a very consistent CTA at the bottom.
Okay. Amazing. And so help me understand the difference between putting this into a regular, no GPT
Yep.
versus this custom GPT.
So it depends how you are utilizing your ChatGPT in the first place, because you can add custom memory to your ChatGPT at any point. You don't have to create a custom GPT. Do I recommend it? Absolutely, every single time. But if I was to say, ask our ChatGPT, this one for Ross Taylor Mortgages specifically, to create a post without this customization, it might be littered in emojis and hashtags. It's going to do what it thinks is a best practice for LinkedIn formatting based on what it finds on the internet instead of following the strict formatting that I've given it and the best practices. Like I don't want this littered in emojis. I want it to have that same tone every single time. Um, so yeah, it's going to do what it thinks is best if it's not a custom GPT. But if you've added memory, it can do kind of a good job. But if you want it to do the best job, you are creating a custom GPT that is specific to that platform.
Yeah. I've definitely experienced this. We've experienced it within our agencies. If you're not training it, or if you don't have that customization, it emojis everywhere, or it just doesn't really sound like you. You're having to adjust it over and over again.
Absolutely.
And so we're seeing that you are sharing a bunch of different examples. So you have this LinkedIn prompt, you have Google My Business, you have the newsletter prompt. What have you seen, like before we dive into like behind the scenes and creating this, how has this impacted Ross Taylor Mortgages from like a time saving perspective?
Oh, absolutely. So, on average, and we were doing some research on this already, and the internet seems to think, and this is using one of the tools that we'll mention more in depth later on this, is that Perplexity has said that users are finding that they're saving anywhere from 3+ hours a day just on content creation and client interaction. For this business specifically, I would say that it's 5 to 6 hours a day that we're saving just on the content creation aspect because we're able to put out content creation faster than ever. And written content has always been the bread and butter of this business specifically. That's how users find us. And the website is such a strategic house for lead generation.
All right. Amazing. Yeah. I can't imagine what I could do with 5 to 6 extra hours in a day.
Well, not only that, I mean, something that you and I talked about already is the front end GPTs because this is Ross Taylor's ChatGPT. He has access to all of this. So
Right.
ideally, if you have a brand or company ChatGPT, a pro account, you can create these tools and then anyone can be trained to use said tools. So he is using them more than ever and is using them to create content. And I'm sure that you can relate to this being an editor versus a creator out of nothing. He can have a very great idea. We can research it and then put it through our custom GPTs to create a piece of content, a really well established piece of content, well formatted, well researched piece of content faster than ever before. Like you take that content creation process down from that maybe 4 hours on a well researched piece down to maybe 1 hour with editing and sometimes even faster than that.
You touch on something I was going to ask you to actually dive into because it was a part that I was really, really cautious about when it comes down to content creation.
Yeah.
Because now anybody can submit a prompt and, it'll spit out an article that, sounds okay and sounds right. But making sure that it is credible, well researched, has the right stats was something that, was really, really important to me when building more of a content engine that utilizes AI. So I'm curious, or if you can explain, like, how do you make sure that the content you're producing is good and high quality?
For sure. So one of the tools that I mentioned already is Perplexity, and I'm already sharing my screen, so I'm in here. And I did use this earlier just to look at some of the ROI, some of the what are people saying by using custom GPTs in their business? What are the time saving aspects? So Perplexity is probably the most powerful and utilized tool that I use in AI, and I would put that right next to ChatGPT. It's in direct competition, but something that I'm sure we've all experienced, it's only been on the scene for years, ChatGPT, is that
Yep.
in the beginning, it was much more susceptible to hallucination, and that would be creating mistakes. So, based on the models that it's already been trained on, sometimes those models have only been trained up to a certain point of the corpus of the internet. The difference with Perplexity is that because it's a search engine AI, is that it can search real time, do your reasoning, make sure you can ask it multiple questions. So let's say you have an idea of a blog post that you would like to create, or just a piece of content that you would like to create. You ask it its questions, and then it will also provide you follow-up questions. So for this one, I said, what is the ROI for creating GPTs that create in your company's tone of voice and branding while being fully researched? And albeit I am not the best at sometimes answering questions, or sorry, asking questions inside ChatGPT and Perplexity, I know that it's going to do a good job of understanding what I'm trying to say because they're very, very comprehensive and very powerful. And it gives me all of this. And with that, I see sources. So that if I want to click on any of these, I can go to the source, I can see what it's actually pulling from. And that's another thing with credibility is that you want real-time sources. You want to make sure that you're pulling from that. So something that we've started doing, especially with Ross Taylor Mortgages, because it's like we have to be looking at government policies, insurance policies, and making sure that the content is accurate. Once we fully finalize an article, for example, we're going to run that entire thing through Perplexity to be like, I want you to check the accuracy of this entire article before we publish it. And that's our final like safeguard. And that's one of those really important steps that I think most people should be taking, if not all of them, when working with AI for content creation.
Yeah. That's a really, really great tip to do that validation at the end of it.
It asks you follow-up questions as well. So if you wanted to say, how does AI impact the overall quality of content? It's going to research that for you. Now we're getting to see in real time. And look at all the sources that it just pulled from. That's crazy. So you can
Yeah.
then take this content and put it into a custom GPT that you've created and then create your posts so that you're making sure that it's researched, that it's accurate, and that it's timely information that people actually care about.
Yeah, that's incredible. So when you're building these GPTs, but you're also leveraging other tools. So what are the tools you would recommend when you're just getting started dipping into AI, like in general? What are the tools you would recommend?
So there's actually a few things that I can recommend, and one of them, this is actually before we get into. So this is a directory for AI tools. I love Futurepedia. It's awesome. So let's say I want something. Obviously, it's got ChatGPT is its most powerful one, popular tools. But you can actually put inside here, like, I want to find a presentation maker, or I want a YouTube summarizer, and it will find that for you and give you the most up to date, relevant AI system that you can use for that. Because AI tools are being created every single day, but how good they are, the access. So Futurepedia.io is one of the ones that came on the scene really, really quickly as soon as ChatGPT was released, because not only is ChatGPT a platform that everyone can use, but a lot of apps that were already existing started using those language models and adding it to their existing platforms. Like you'll see it, Canva has AI, Squarespace has AI, like all these different website builders are adding AI, which is essentially ChatGPT's large language models to enhance their existing products. So something like this is a really powerful directory so that you can find different things. Like let's see if I say YouTube summarizer. I hope I spelled that right. There we go. So YouTube Summarizer. A few people have already saved this. I use one on on my other one, and that it's a Chrome extension. And so instead of having to watch a 2 hour long video that where I want to learn something, it's just going to summarize that entirely for me based on it going through that large language model. It's very, very powerful. Whenever I'm using any tools for either a client or myself, I try to keep it simple, stupid. That's one of the big things that I think both of us try to emulate in our businesses and when we're working with people is that so often we have to hand off things and make sure that it's as clear as possible and that it's as simple as possible. And I'll say this again, the example of Futurepedia and all these different systems and platforms being spun up so quickly and quicker than ever, there's a lot out there. And if you're not careful, you could be spending a lot of money on these new systems that are constantly being replaced. But if you can start with the basics, like again, using Google Drive, using note takers or something like that. I try to stick in Google Drive as much as possible. And some of the people in the space that I work with and that I study from, they'll use a whole suite of tools that end up just being a couple more $1,000s a month in subscription. So I try to keep it as light as possible and as simple as possible so that I can hand those things off to either someone that I want to hand the process of making something off or adapting it.
Yeah. Yeah. One that's music to my ears. And I know when we first started out thinking about how can I adopt AI a little bit further, what are areas in my business where I need to automate more or save on time? And I know that creating something a little bit more custom can do that. And you had walked through like, here are the tools, asking me what I already use. And that made the process much easier to consume as well as somebody who's just starting out. I think we've accelerated from there, but no, it's been so far it's been wonderful to leverage the existing tools, but then add on more. But starting with something you already have is always an easy starting point.
You touched on something really important, and that's it's understanding your client and the business that you're working with and listening to them. And I know that that's something that you talk about in your business always is like listening to the clients, understanding their needs and their priorities, and just actually sitting down with the client and seeing how you already do things and then how you can further optimize and innovate on top of the existing things because you can hand a brand new system to a business, but if it has nothing to do with their existing systems and processes, it's very hard for them to absorb it and to adopt it. So if you
Yeah.
can enhance the existing things and see where those areas for innovation is and optimization, then you're going to do a lot better when you're trying to implement these tools.
100%. Like AI is here to innovate and optimize the way you do work today so you can accelerate getting to tomorrow. And understanding the where you are you and where do you want to go is so important in building these tools so that they are scalable. And that's something that, we had worked through that you had built for merge marketing as well. And obviously you're doing the same for other organizations. I don't want to get too in detail because we're going to go through and do like another more advanced topic on, building out a full automated workflow,
For sure.
leveraging multiple different systems. But for this conversation, I'm curious when it comes to like the LinkedIn prompt creator, the LinkedIn caption creator, sorry, what does it look like behind the scenes? How did you build that?
For sure. So let me get these open. Two screens open here. And I'm logged into Ross Taylor Mortgages one. So I showed you the LinkedIn post creator, and I'm just going to replicate how I would go about creating exactly that one, and just for ease of saving time. So right here, I'm inside ChatGPT, and I have on the left hand side instructions that I've created. So I have a step by step of the things that I try to always emulate in the instructions that I'm giving any GPT. So who it is, what its task is, what its purpose is, the audience, the profile of the business that we're writing for, brand voice, writing style. I get really nitty gritty with this one specifically because it depends. Like I really want it to sound like him, and for that, I'll also go ahead and say that we have a tone of voice and writing style guide document that we create for every business that we work with to make sure that when we're creating these custom GPTs, that we want that brand voice to be consistent every single time. And that's something that we already mentioned as well. Is that if you have, say, other people using these tools, you're going to have a much higher success rate of having that brand voice be consistent because these different GPTs are already trained on the tone of voice that you're trying to emulate in your brand and company. and the formatting that you would like to have there as well. So
Yeah.
core values, engagement tactics. I have an example of this one. So for this one, I also go through the different formatting. So for this one, I said review the content that you're getting. You want first person point of view, 10 to 15 sentences. And you can see like these documents of instructions are sometimes 3 pages in length that I've created. Is that I want it to be as clear as possible, because if you give it a garbage prompt, you're probably going to get a
Gonna get
garbage
it
output.
back.
And
And
if
just
you're too simple, then you might not get the answers that you're looking for. So
yeah, I really want to emphasize the importance of having this much detail. And I think it's so important to show that when you're building these ChatGPT prompts, it is not just a here's who we are, here's who our audience is. Like you have a full list of instructions that honestly, like for any business they would need to have anyways as a part of their marketing guide or even just like their business overview. And so you're feeding that information along with a lot of examples to ChatGPT, it looks like.
exactly. So clear instructions, and I'll move this into ChatGPT. So on the right side, we have ChatGPT open, and you just open that hamburger menu. You would go to explore GPTs and then create. So I'm just going to call it V2 because we already have the one created. So
Yep.
V2 RTM LinkedIn host creator. This one, and you can create all of this. And like I said, I like to have all my instructions kind of laid out. The description I'll generally just write on the fly. The instructions is what I'm grabbing from here. So description, you are able to take any input you receive to create a fully formatted LinkedIn post in my voice, Ross Taylor.
Oh.
Okay. So another thing to note is that when you're inputting these instructions, you're actually limited to 8,000 characters. About a year ago, when we were creating these, there was no limitations on the amount of characters, but I imagine that the amount of memory and storage that it takes to house all of this is just, it's a lot. So now they're limiting it. And we'll show you something about the difference between right now we're using the configure versus the create. So I'm going to add an icon. I have one already that I want. So I'm going to use this one just so I know that it's different than the one that I've already created. And I'm only giving it one example. So I am giving it one example of a LinkedIn post. And this is just basically like, it's got the formatting that I want. So it's got the formatting that I want. It's roughly the right amount of length that I want it to, and it sounds like them. And so I've have all these instructions. Look at that. That's 4 pages of instructions
Yeah, wow.
that I'm going to grab that and I'm going to paste it. And then I'm also going to upload files. So I'm going to upload from here. I'm going to give it my tone of voice document. So this is a specific brand guide and variety style guide for Ross Taylor's tone of voice.
Okay. I'm so sorry.
No, I
Okay.
feel like that just makes the magic better.
Yeah. So you're uploading a tone of voice document.
Yeah,
Okay. And
tone
that
of
tone of
voice
voice
document.
document, I'm assuming is something that's consistent across all the GPTs you create for
Absolutely.
these
It's the
customers.
same one across the board. I might even, if I decide I want to update that tone of voice document, that means I'm going to go into every GPT that I've created and actually update it and like remove the old one and update it again. Or I would go through this create module where I would basically update and give it specific instructions so that ChatGPT can update it for me. So we'll show you that real
Hmm.
quick. But first, I've already given it the tone of voice, and then I'm going to give it LinkedIn. So some LinkedIn samples. So because I was cats, and this is a thing that you'll find when you're creating custom GPTs, I wanted to give it so many different examples. I have all these well-written examples here that it's like, so like 4 or 5 different examples. But because I'm limited to that 8,000 character limit, I have to attach the examples separately. So I'm going to do that
Okay.
there. And now I'm going to create it. You can also preview. So let's say that I want to, let's give it another article that we've written. And I just want to see how it's going to do. So I'm going to copy and paste this whole piece. Like I said, I could also just do a piece of this article and see how it does, or a piece of
Yeah.
news. But for this one, I'm going to just say, please write a LinkedIn post based on. I'm going to say this article. I'm not even going to say that it's mine because I'm not going to ask it for ask it to point to it.
Okay. So now you've inputted all the information for the GPT and now
Yep.
you're testing it?
Now I'm testing it. So yes,
Okay.
this is a point of refinement. Sometimes I actually skip this because I'll create it. I know because I've created so many of them, I might skip this specific part and start using it. But so it's doing a pretty good job right now, and I like that. So, but let's say I wanted to create it from there. I can either say only me, so that it's only available to the people who have access to this ChatGPT specifically, or anyone with this link can use it. So I'm just going to say only me for right now. Let's say though, I start working with it and maybe I'm not that happy with it. I want to give it more info. So here we're in the configure, and now we can do create. Some people, when they're creating GPTs, will just go with create. They'll basically go back and forth with ChatGPT to create a custom GPT without having to create all those instructions.
Okay.
So let's say I want to give this more context. I want to, because I was able to only give it a few examples, I want to give it all these examples. So I'm going to say, I'm going to grab all this, and now I'm going to say, please add these examples to our or to your memory. These, I'm going to say LinkedIn, to your memory for formatting and tone of voice. Shift, enter, control V. So now I'm giving it all of the examples that I initially wanted to add to it in the instructions. I'm
Yeah.
giving it more. And down here, it's updating the GPT for me. I don't have to be that specific. I could just be like, I don't want you to keep giving me hyphens, or I want you to be more opinionated or something like that. So
Right.
I've tested either creating a GPT, just using ChatGPT to help me create it, or doing configure and that by itself. I find a combination of both will get you the best outputs.
Okay.
So, and then
And
I
I think
think
what you're
go ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna say what you're highlighting is really the importance of testing and not just letting it go with the first version. So continue to test, refine, test and refine, add more information. And it sounds like the more you add, the better the output's going to be.
Yes.
All right.
But sometimes as well, if you have given it specific instructions that almost go against its instructions, it will it will completely change these. So
Okay.
it did already. Let's see. So the original instructions that I've given it, it completely changed those instructions. So this one actually might work differently than the other one. And I'm going to see it because we have the other one already made. I just want to see how this does. And this time I'm going to give it just a link and actually see how it performs.
Okay.
And this is where the refinement comes in, because we know for a fact that
You
these
can't add
types of
bullet.
bullet points are not going to work for LinkedIn.
Yeah.
They have to be indented. And that's actually in one of the very specific rules that we've given it, is to not use specific emojis, to not do any sort of indentation. So by working with the configure over here, see how it changed all my instructions? That means that it lost the do's and the don'ts and the very specific
Ah.
things that I told it how to format itself. Now I can actually go back. So I can say version history up here, and I want to compare the different changes. There
So
we go.
it changes automatically based on some of the and they create when you go to the create area.
Yes, not every single time, but sometimes. So the other one that I created earlier, I did add some samples and it didn't actually change the configure settings whatsoever. So it might have been the language that I use that it was like, okay, now we're going to update this GPT completely. Whereas we should have just added it to the memory, like added the existing samples to the memory so that it writes better in that sense. So let's say I want to restore the previous version, I can go back because that'll happen sometimes too, is that as you're testing and refining, maybe you had better outputs the first time and you actually want to iterate that information slightly. And you don't have to go through the create module. You can just keep configuring and updating your instructions if you're being really, really specific. But yeah,
Okay,
what that
awesome.
looks like to create a custom GPT.
Thank you so much for walking us through this. I think the most important part that I'm capturing is you need very clear instructions, provide examples, have a tone of voice, very detailed document that represents you, the speaker, your brand, and obviously like do's and don'ts in terms of what you typically say, what you don't say. And then the other side of that is you can give it all of it. You can give all the instructions, all the data points, or all the information, but you still need to test and iterate. And so at what point are you happy to say this is good to now use? It's good for prime time.
So it's definitely probably I would say half an hour to an hour of testing of just to make sure that I'm happy with it. But the beauty of it being inside ChatGPT is that and versus let's say a backend GPT, which we'll cover next time on our second call, is that I can go back and forth with it. I can ask it inside that specific GPT to be like, actually, I want this to be a little bit more opinionated, or let's make
Yeah.
this section a little bit longer versus having to do all that editing myself. I can ask it to. One of the big things I'm always saying to a custom GPT is remember your formatting. Just
Yeah.
saying that line, be like, remember your formatting because it has such clear instructions. It'll be like, "Oh, yeah, sorry, I remember," and then it will give you that piece returned formatted exactly the way that you like it, and that's something I probably could have done already with the output that we got hyphens, but
Right.
it has changed its instructions.
Right on. Yes. Yeah. Very, very true. Like the continued refinement, testing, instructions are so
Are so
very
very
important.
important.
And then, I can see this being so useful for so many different people and businesses. One, like agencies who have multiple clients who might be creating content or sourcing content for their clients. Business owners like Ross Taylor Mortgages who create a ton of content and need to then post it across multiple channels. Business owners who are building a brand for themselves, a personal brand, and who need to, show up a little bit more. They don't even need to write their own content. Maybe they need to share their opinion about other pieces that are in the market. So I
Absolutely.
see this being a huge content creation opportunity for so many different businesses if built the right way.
For sure. And if you don't already have content that you've written, I mean, finding the formatting that works for your niche and your competition, and then using that as almost a structure. I'm not saying ripping content or copy from anybody else, but let's say like I was saying with the LinkedIn post, for example, the single sentence structure, line break structure, that happens to be what works best in the mortgage brokering community and what seems to perform very, very well. You'd want to look at marketing, of course, in your lens and see, okay, what is my competition doing? Why are these specific posts performing well? And what pieces do I need to take to emulate in terms of formatting and structure? And like, how can I apply that to my business?
So we've walked through a lot of the how to's, somewhat touched on some do's and don'ts, but I would love to end off here with what are some common mistakes that you see businesses making when launching into AI content workflows or content creation that they can avoid?
For sure. So we've been touching on it on this call already, especially when walking through the custom GPT creation. And you saw how lengthy and specific I've gotten into these instructions that I'm giving these custom GPTs. And it's very common and it's been on the scene, good prompting and bad prompting since ChatGPT came on the scene in 2022. Is that there are prompt engineers for a reason. Your input is just as powerful as your output. So if you're giving it a shoddy sentence and expecting it to do all the work, can it do all the work? Yes. Are you going to get the best output that is also going to serve your company and your brand? and your future clients? Probably not. And it's not going to look the best either. So that's one big thing is good and bad prompting. You want to be as specific as possible and consistent as possible with your brand. And we've touched on it again, tone of voice. So establishing that tone of voice and brand guideline when creating these GPTs is so important. And we touched on it lightly as well, adding memory to your chat GPT saying, this is who I am, this is the type of business that I run, this is what I do, so that it gives you, if you're not using a custom GPT, it's still going to give you something that sounds a little bit like you. But if you are creating custom GPTs, having that very specific tone of voice document is so, so important because you want it to be consistent across every GPT that you create. And that way, every single piece of content that is being created with these custom GPTs is always on brand. And then the last one, and I would say probably the most important one, and is, of course, as you're using these tools, as you're creating content faster than ever, you're going to have a ton of content to go through, and you still have to go through the content. Something that's a very popularized term in the AI automation community is the human in the loop. And that is okay, we have all these different tools, whether it's the custom GPT creating content for you or an automation that works in the back end to again create a content or say send emails and have that client interaction is that you still want to be reviewing that content. And there are tools now that exist and some automations that exist that you can create custom agents to be that review person, but I would still recommend having a human in the loop every single time.
Yeah. Regardless of how often we use AI and how much we're using it for, there is always a human element, either in the starting phase, or it's always there in the starting and ending phase, but nothing ever goes out the door without a human reviewing to make sure that it truly sounds human. And a lot of the time the outputs, because they're so refined and like you said, tone of voice document that really mirrors how we speak, kind of guides what the output is, and it's usually really great. I still like to go through and edit to make sure it is even more refined and sounds human. It sounds like me. So I can't agree with you enough on that human in the loop step.
I mean, your posts are awesome. They are awesome. Every single time I see them, like, yep, that's dope. Every single time it resonates, it hits deeply. But that's because you're taking the time to then refine and edit these pieces to make sure that it still sounds like you. Yoast just put out a newsletter actually saying that is that the content that's performing the best might be written by AI, but it sounds like a human and is formatted properly so that AI can scrape it really easily. Same thing with SEO and Google being able to read that material really easily is that you're going to get penalized if you sound like a robot or if you sound like a non-human.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, thank you so much again for sharing all this, walking through, how to create that front end GPT, something I know will be beneficial for so many different businesses. And with that, I do want to share something very exciting is that we are going to be offering 5 organizations or people, the first 5 who are interested, and we will build a custom LinkedIn GPT for them, which includes very thorough instructions that are dedicated to their business, as well as a tone of voice document, once again, that is very specific to their business. These documents are very lengthy, very descriptive, and take time to create, but are very imperative in ensuring that your GPT is effective. And so we'll do all of that and a little bit of competitive research to make sure your formatting is on point. So you can have a fully functioning LinkedIn caption generator that really sounds like you. By adding this LinkedIn caption generator, you're pretty much adding a whole new team member. Keep in mind that these tools can save you as much as 3 to 6 hours in a week, and just that much more extra time that you don't have to think about what you're going to post, what it's going to sound like, what you're going to write, because the engine's going to do it for you. So if you're interested in a custom GPT created specifically for you, get in touch via DM or comment below and we will be in touch. Thank you so much, Ayesha. This was super, super insightful, helpful, educational, all the things. And we will definitely continue the conversation with some more in-depth GPT and AI automation workflows to come.
Amazing. Thank you for having me.
Of course.